Welcome to Triangle BNI. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, I've been telling you for a long time, it is loud and crowded in the digital world. So you need professionals and experts like Oak City Tech to help you with the web design, on social media, email campaigns, SEO, everything. Please go to oakcitytech.com, set up an appointment with them, tell them what you're looking for. I know they'll be able to help you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Manning. Each week here on Triangle BNI, we bring you a small business success story. If you are not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International, our little slice, the world's largest networking organization. Our little slice of heaven here in the Triangle is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. Each week, about 30 chapters and almost 600 members get together, and our sole goal is to help each other grow their business. And normally, I would introduce our small business success story today, but Amnon, as you know, in live radio and live television, stuff happens. My guest had a conflict and had to go, so it's just me today. Just going to rehash or talk about some of my favorite stories here on the show. We've been doing this, what are we, Amnon, 2.5 years in now, I think. 2019 we
Uh,
started.
who's counting? It's
I know. It's like episode, I think 117 or 118 has been a blast. And we certainly had some cool stories come in. The format obviously is a success, and the folks watching, we appreciate everybody who catches us each week. And I know you enjoy the format because of the stories. And I just look at it as what would entertain me. And if it'll entertain me, it's probably usually pretty good stuff. And the guests are um, agreeable to come bring on stories. Some probably they haven't told in a while. Some they may not want to tell too much, but we have fun talking because we all have those stories. We'd like to not quite forget them, but we'd like for them not to be talked about anymore. But, after a few years and time goes by, you just say, what the heck? Let me go ahead and tell the story. So,
Really?
yes, a very nice sound effect. The most popular guest we probably had on was Wes Harper. And you may remember Wes from the show called Naked and Afraid, or in the South, we call it Naked and Afraid. But I've never watched the show until I knew I was going to have Wes on, and I watched the show. And basically, it's two people, a male and a female, no clothes on, and they have to survive for X number of days. One of the neat things about hearing the stories from Wes is what you can bring to the survival, and you get one thing. And he brought rope because you can do a lot of things with rope. And like I said, you can get one thing. And the lady he went with, Jesse, I believe she brought a knife. But Wes told some great stories. Originally, he's an outdoor guy, and he and his wife were watching the show one day. And I think right at the end, it came on and said, if you'd like to apply to be a contestant on the show, here's how you apply. And he kind of made a joke about it. He wasn't going to. And then his wife submitted the application for him. And enough time went by, and he was approved to be on the show. What he did prior to going on the show was just started walking around everywhere barefooted because you have no clothing. So there's nothing to do. You get a bag. You can kind of carry some things in, but that's it. And he knew that he had to toughen up his feet for starters. And so he started walking everywhere through the grass, neighborhood, on the road, finding some rocks to walk on, sidewalk, everything he could, because he knew he had to toughen up his feet because he had no idea where he was going to be walking. And then they go without food and water for a while. There's always somebody there to make sure they're okay. One of the neat things learning from him is I thought they had a different campsite every night, but basically they had one or two locations and they kept going out to get things and coming back to that site. And that has zero interest for me. I'm not a camper, but B, just have no desire to try to do that. So hats off to all the people, the energy junkies that we call, do that. The favorite part of the episode he was on, he's been on a couple now. I think he's been on a third because this is back when we were doing the show in the studio. And when we finished the show and left the studio that day, I asked him, I said, "Are we going to get a chance to talk to you again about this or see you on TV?" And he just kind of smiled and goes, "You never know, but there's conversations going on." So I don't know if he's done that yet or not. I believe he has. I'll have to get up with him. Maybe we can bring him back on. But my favorite part of the show was towards the end. And the girl he was surviving with, Jessie, I think she was from Canada. And they had never met. First time they met was face to face, no clothes on. There's nothing other than their name, and you just show up and that's how you meet. Towards the end of their time on the show, I think it was the night before or the 2 nights before they were gonna be done to get to the checkpoint, which, by the way, when they pick you up at the checkpoint, he said they just whatever you want to eat or drink, and he did pizza and beer, I believe. But she was very hungry, and so was Wes, and pretty near their tent or their campground, they didn't have a tent, their campground they had to build, was a beehive with a bunch of honey there. And he and Jesse talked about it. They're both very hungry, but should they try to do anything? And she was so hungry that she decided to go over there and cut into the beehive to get some of the honey out. She was successful. And it was very interesting to watch that because it was risk reward. She was that hungry that she wanted the honey. And Wes was not hungry enough to possibly get stung by bees. And it was a wonderful part of the show that we got to talk about because they both had to make a decision, and she was willing to take the risk of possibly getting stung and he wasn't. And the only question I want to know from him is, did she share with him when she brought the honey back to their camping area? And he said she did. So that's pretty cool. So hopefully I haven't talked to him in a while. I may touch base with him, see if we can get him back on and if he's been on the show again. But don't know, people enjoy that. It's fun to watch because you see people in misery. It's kind of like soap operas. You just want all the drama on TV, not as much in your life. But it was very interesting. He was a wonderful guest, told good stories. There's a couple things he couldn't talk about, which I get. But for the most, nothing big, but for the most part, he was just good on how he got there and why you do stuff like that. And it's usually you meet people like, once again, why do you do that? And they're like, I don't know. It just sounded like a good idea at the time. So one of my other favorite guests on the
And
show.
and and just
Yes.
and just to mention here that anybody who wants to watch it, this was February 24th, 2020. So you can go to the on demand and see
Thank
it.
you. Yeah. That was one of the last shows we did. Well, no, did we go in person through April or maybe May?
I don't
Yeah.
remember.
It was close around there.
Yeah, but anyway,
Um,
it's
yep.
it's there.
No, I appreciate that. My other favorite story, just because I didn't know what I knew prior to knowing it, if that makes sense to you, was Charles Calloway. I've known Charles for a little bit. He's a financial advisor. And we got to talking. And normally, when I do research on a guest, I'll go to their LinkedIn page, I'll go to their Facebook page. And once I find everything I need to from there, I will just start Googling them. And going through Charles' background and everything, I found out he's from Cleveland, Ohio. And that's where I was born in. I don't, I'm going to be 60 at the end of May. So I was
You're
born in,
just a kid.
I know, I'm still 22 mentally. My back hurts, but the mind is still young. So the body speaks louder than the mind does at this age. But I was born in Cleveland in 1961, and I saw Charles was from Cleveland. So I've got a checklist of things. I always want to do a little bit of educating at the beginning of the show, and then kind of get into their work history and a little bit of BNI. And then I want to get into the things where the stories are, because again, I want to be entertained. And I knew Charles was from Cleveland, but that's all I knew. And so we started talking. And I said that was one of two connections we had. I forgot what the second one was, but we had the connection of being from Cleveland. And I didn't even know how old he was because the stuff he has on his on anywhere I couldn't find when he was born. And we started talking, and I told him that I was born in the Booth Memorial Hospital for unwed mothers because my dad, I think he got me out of there for like $50. He bragged on that for years. He just he's very pleased on how he did that. Of course, back then, $50 was probably a lot of money because it was all cash back then. And so Charles and I were talking, and he's like, well, I was born in Cleveland about that time. And I think our birthdays are pretty close. I think we were born in the same year, I believe. But yeah, I think we're a couple months apart. And I get a call from him about, I don't know, 2 weeks later. And he's like, hey, enjoyed the show. Want to let you know I was born at Booth Memorial Hospital in Cleveland as well. So, and as Charles tells the story, two different reasons. One father not present, one father too cheap to take his wife somewhere else to have a kid. So that was a lot of fun. That's one of the things I enjoy, which is why I like doing the research to find those little things, the potential things that could connect us a little bit more. But there are good stories. And um, Charles and I, we saw each other, I guess, about a month ago. He's working on a project that I'm going to help him with a friend of mine, Joe Woolworth, who's been on the show, do some video. And we are telling Joe about the story. Charles just dying laughing, telling it because I think it's pretty cool. So, um, but that was a good story with Charles as well. The the stories that really get my interest
And
are,
and Charles was March 30th of 2020. This
yep,
is just the beginning of the
yeah,
clampdown.
yeah. And man, it's been weird. I know you and I, Amnon, we've not seen each other in person probably since I think May, right? Ish.
No, you came a couple times. You took some things. I mean, but doing a show, yeah,
No, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, and I came into Zoom kicking and screaming. I wanted no part of not being around people. And man, it has far exceeded my expectations because I have met this group of networkers up in Vancouver, Canada, and made some good connections, working on a couple things. And I would have never met those folks if COVID hadn't started. But I'm okay. I'm slowly starting to get out to see some people. I think I've got one this Wednesday. I had a face to face, with Steve Hand the other day on
Hmm.
Friday. And that's the first time I think I'd seen anybody face to face in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And which is fine. Like I said, Zoom has far exceeded my expectations. I've been very pleased with it because I didn't realize, I don't know about everybody else, but I didn't realize how much I drove around town for meetings. And I live right down the road from you. We live right near the Raleigh Cary line.
Hmm.
And I think now, am I ever going to drive to Wake Forest again for a meeting? I don't know about that, but I can sit and do 5 meetings a day if I wanted to on Zoom. And so and whereas driving, unless I said, hey, folks, which Trinity, my coaching partner, does, she would say, hey, I'm going to be at Panera's in Briar Creek on next Tuesday. And she'd send notes out to everybody, said, hey, I'm going to be there. Would love to meet with you. Can you grab one of the time slots here? So, but I just didn't realize how much I drove for about 2 months of being home. And then it's like, wow, I really am being more efficient. But I enjoy the how you met your spouse. And I learned something, and I don't ever mind calling myself out. So Noemi Rodriguez, a friend who is a mortgage lender, and had Noemi on the show, and I made an assumption. And Noemi was very nice about it. And I told her, I'd set up the question, said, Noemi's one of my favorite questions. How did you meet your husband? And do you both tell the story the same way? And she paused and looked at me and she said, you mean my wife? And I said, yes, I did. So from now on, if I don't know if they're married to a man or woman, which doesn't matter to me at all, I just want the story. I just say, how did you meet your spouse? And you both tell the story the same way. But Noemi was real nice about it, but it was a valuable lesson. I made an assumption and shouldn't have. But Noemi was a good story. She is of Cuban descent and she grew up in Miami. Wonderful, wonderful person, very colorful. I like her because she'll say whatever's on her mind, and those kind of people I like hanging out with. But when you grow up in Miami, obviously the culture there, big Cuban community, Hispanic community, lot of different languages being spoken there. And Noemi played high school and a little bit of college softball down there. And if you've ever watched women's softball, there are cheers and chants from the dugout when your team is batting. And they have the regular cheers, they have practice cheers, they have some off the cuff stuff. But in South Florida, the teams Noemi played on, they were mostly Cuban and Hispanic language cheers because that's who they were. And she came up to Queens College here, right outside Charlotte, to play collegiate softball. And she's a pretty good player. And she takes great pride in telling the story on the show about how she taught all these non Cuban and non Hispanic female softball players all these cultural cheers and chants that the other teams had never heard of, and they were not in English. She taught them whatever language it was in. She taught them the cheer, and she said they got more looks of what in the world is going on in that dugout because the conference they played in, I believe, was more uh, private schools than public schools. And she just was laughing telling that story. So I very much enjoyed that because it's different. Different's always good. You never know what you're going to learn. But Noemi was a lot of fun. But I did learn a lesson on never assume a guy's married to a girl and a girl's married to or lady's married to a man. So, but
She was great. I mean,
yeah.
I wish she would want to do a show on her own because
Oh
she
yeah.
can. And
Yep.
and her show was on December 24th, 2018. So it was on
Yeah. This is one of the early
Christmas
ones.
Eve.
Yep.
And by the way, I did some research here, and we started with Zoom on March 30th
Of
of
2019.
2020.
Oh, started Zoom March.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. That's what I figured. So we're coming up on, geez, what'll be your year? It's a day today, 29th.
yeah.
So it'll be a year tomorrow. I know you've missed me.
Oh, I am. I miss. I just miss the company here
I know.
in the studio, but
Yep.
it's gonna be fine.
Oh
I
yeah.
wish.
Yeah. And I miss coming to the studio every month. So
If you called me earlier and you said that you're gonna be by yourself, I would have said come here.
oh.
Come on,
Okay.
we've been vaccinated. We can do it.
Yeah. I can't get in to get vaccinated. I don't check the right boxes yet. So
Well,
but I'm trying to find a place. So if anybody knows where I go, I keep getting online to Google places that have it. And they said no appointments, but that's a whole nother podcast. So we can go into that later. Staying on the theme of how you met your spouse, uh, two of my favorite stories um, are was from one. The first one was from Kenny Bollinger, another financial advisor. He is in a Wednesday group that meets at lunch in downtown Raleigh at the Ale House. Kenny played football at Hofstra, so I knew that'd be fun to talk about, and had no idea how he met his wife. And so I asked him the question of, "How'd you meet your wife? Do you tell the story the same way?" And he said, they do tell the story roughly the same way. They just from a different point of view, but I'll explain that in a second. Kenny was a financial advisor in New York City. And every day after work, he would go catch the train. I think it's like a 5:28 or 5:24 train to make a connection for him to get home out of leave the city, connect on another train to get home. Did it every day, no big deal. One day he misses his train, and the next train was like 5:40 or something like that. So he's got to wait for that train to come by to get the right connection to where he needs to go. And he gets on the train and he sees this woman, and he is rather smitten with her, just visual only, just rather smitten with her. Made a mental note of it. Gets to work the next day, goes through the workday, leaves the office at the regular time, and skips his 5:24 train in hopes that she is on the 5:40 train, which she was. That was her normal train, her normal way home, and he got up the nerve to go talk to her. And as of this day, they have three kids. So, and that was 13, 14 years ago. Wonderful story. I love those moments in time, which we've talked about some. If he doesn't miss that train, who's he married to? Where's he living? Who's she married to? Where's she living? Different kids, obviously. So I love these moments in time when things change
We'll never know.
trajectories.
We'll never know.
I know, which is, again, I just love these. And so he says she tells a story the same way, only she tells people he was stalking her,
Yeah, it is
which
stalking. Come on.
technically is correct. And he is happy to tell people he was.
And his show was on January 7th, 2019.
Yeah, but I just those moments, it
Mhm.
just yeah, because of it, you look back and you have to trigger things and I've had this discussion with friends before. We even have to go back to our parents. What were those moments in time? Like my dad was from Cleveland, Ohio. My mom was from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They met at Florida State University only because my dad was in the Air Force, got stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in the panhandle there of Florida, and a football scout sees him, said, "Hey, why don't you come to Florida State and play football?" Where my mom was a student. So my dad doesn't join the Air Force, doesn't get stationed at Eglin. Do they ever meet? And then
Mm.
somebody else would be doing this show today, and that's just wrong. So, but those moments in time are good. They just really are. Oh, and Becky and I met in Austin, Texas. And she was there a year before I was. She graduated college a year before I did. So she'd already been working there. And I was finishing up school at the University of Tennessee. And this was 1983. And my boss at Tennessee knew my future boss at the University of Texas. I went sight unseen. And if that doesn't happen, obviously Becky and I never meet. And, who knows where we both are today. So those moments in time they're fun to look back at. And you don't necessarily need to play the what if game, but just look at it as wow, that's pretty cool. It happened that way. The other husband wife story is from a friend of mine, Tom Adams, with iWatch Security. Tom's wife, Rochelle, was in Spain on a school trip. I believe she was doing a year abroad. And Tom was over there for work. And again, here comes another train involved story. He gets on a train. He couldn't remember exactly where he was going to another meeting, I believe. And there's Rochelle, his wife, on the train. And again, totally smitten, visual only. Worked up the nerve to go say hi to her. They met. He was supposed to fly back he's from New York. He was supposed to fly back like 2 days later. And he called his boss, said, "Hey, I'm gonna be staying here a little while longer." So, and he and his wife Rochelle have a couple of kids, happily married. But again, the odds of meeting somebody there, and they're both from the States. I think she's from Philadelphia, I think, and he's from New York, and they meet in Barcelona. So heck of a story. But again, I love those type of stories.
And that show was on 11/25/2019.
Now, the other type of stories that get me laughing are normally they're high school stories because we've all had those type of stories. Amnon, I don't know if I've ever asked you your first or best high school job story.
Mm, no, you didn't. But you see, I went to school in Israel. Over
Yeah.
there, you didn't go to work. There was no
Oh,
such thing. But I
okay.
did work at a radio uh, store where they were selling and repairing old radios. I mean, back then it was old. So that was my first job.
And was that the first place you worked where they took taxes out of your check?
Yes,
All right. Did they take a lot?
they didn't take a lot. I didn't make a lot.
Okay. And I don't know if I've ever asked you how you and your bride met.
um, when I came here back in the early 70s, I lived in New York, and you can imagine in the city, Lower East Side of
Oh yeah.
Manhattan. It was fun when I look back at it now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get out. I had a friend. I mean, I wanted to get out just for a few days. I had a friend that used to work down here from Israel, and I came down, and I fell in love with the place. But I went back, and then I came again about 2 months later, and that time I met Kathy, and I started coming back every 2 weeks, and every week on the weekend. I mean, and this was a long drive, but back then, you're
Yeah.
young,
Oh, yeah.
nice, comfortable car, and you just get in and you drive for 8 hours. And
Now, yeah.
that's how we met, and then when I moved down here, we moved in together.
Now, for the younger folks listening, back when you and I got our first cars, we would refer to that as 260 air, which is two windows rolled down at 60 miles an hour. That's
Yes,
what
there
blew
was
air into the car
absolutely
because
no AC.
no AC, no power windows, no, none
It
of that.
was it was a 64 Tempest, 6 cylinders, and it had a big dent on the back, and I paid $100 for it.
Sweet. And it was all your
And I mean, I drove the hell out of it.
Tell me that was mint green.
The what?
Tell me that car was mint green color.
It was green. It was green.
Tempest had to be green. Yeah.
It was Earl Scheib job on it.
I remember Earl Shop, what, $60, right?
Yeah,
Get your car
something
for
like that.
60 bucks
Yep,
or whatever it
yep,
is. Yeah.
yep.
Oh, yeah. Now, where did you physically meet?
At Crabtree.
By how did you meet?
Johannes, my friend, knew Kathy. She was managing the Kinder Photo,
Oh,
the store, the studio where they took kids
okay.
pictures,
I got you.
and he wanted to date her friend. So he said, "Look, here, you go out with Amnon, and we'll do a double date."
I need a wingman.
And we did.
Nice. And for those folks who have been in Raleigh a long time, I graduated Millbrook in 79. So 78 and 79, the hot place for prom dinners was the Con Key.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much money we didn't have.
Yep. Yep.
Oh God, we get like 8 of us going. So, hey, we
Yeah.
bragged about it back then.
The
not so
owner
much
was a
now.
good friend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember they had Sam Goody's record store in there.
Yeah,
We'd
uh-huh.
go in there and just flip through all the albums. Yeah. Good stuff. Previous high school jobs, the best story so far is from Joe Navarra, who's a business coach. Joe's from the Northeast, and he and his buddy got a paper route one day. And their sole goal was to make, they were in high school, their sole goal was to make money to buy beer. And Joe goes on to tell a story how his car came into contact with a light pole that was Joe's lucky he walked away from it. He's been sober since. So hats off to him for that. That's going on 20, God, this must be 29, 30 years, something like that. So, but it turned out well. But he and his buddy would go, they get paid and they deliver the afternoon newspaper and they would get paid and they would go hang out in front of a 7-Eleven and get people of legal drinking age. They would hand them money and ask if they'd go in and buy them some beer. And one day that transaction happened and they had a shopping cart that they pushed around with all the newspapers in it. No idea where they got the shopping cart, but still a good part of the story. And it was a warm spring or summer afternoon. They're both tired. So they stopped the shopping cart on the side of the road. They popped the front 2 wheels up over the curb. So 2 wheels in the grass, 2 wheels on the curbing or on the street. And they decided to just lay down the grass right there and take a nap. No interest in working anymore that day or very much. And as Joe and his buddies luck would have it, along comes the supervisor of the paper route delivery people. And he fired them on the spot. That is still my favorite high school story. And Joe and his buddy just weren't that concerned about it because their whole mission to do the paper route, they could do it together, split the money, and then go buy some beer. So I enjoyed that story very much. In the category of you never know what's going to happen to change your trajectory, Drago Braddock, the title sponsor of the show with Oak City Technology. Drago produces. I've known Drago for a while, and he produces another podcast I do with Trinity for Wired to Change, our business coaching uh, company. And Drago was from Arizona, and he was a very good basketball player back then. And he's about 6'3", maybe, and just, I mean, wiry thin. It's amazing how thin he still is, but he eats well because nutrition's been a huge part of his life. But he was set to come play basketball at NC State. And he and his buddies were horsing around. They did a lot of water stuff there in Arizona. Obviously, the weather's good. They live near a lake. And they always get on these jet skis and horse around. And Drago's telling a story one day. They're just kind of doing trick stuff and horsing around like they normally do. And they had a ramp there, a pier there, that they would kind of go up the ramp and jump and land in the water. And Drago was going up the ramp one day and his knee collided with part of the ramp, which wiped him and his jet ski out, and that ended his college career. So from there, he moved here anyways, and started. He's a digital marketer, started his own company, but you just never know what changes things. He was a pretty good player. Herb, he was going to come play for Herb Sendek, but things happen. So, but he had fun telling that story. And in a BNI meeting, when you are the weekly speaker, one of the questions is, tell us something no one knows about you. Again, it's just meant to be lighthearted and just again tell a story because people connect through personal stories. We'll get to the business later, but you generally meet people and get to know them through a personal story, either the neighborhood, the kids, the church, the school, little league, something along those lines. It's generally not business. There's still some business, but generally not business when you meet somebody to connect with them. What are your personal connections? And so Drago was a speaker one day. He goes, man, I don't know what I'm going to talk about or say about something nobody knows about me. I've been in this group for a couple of years. I said, have you ever told them a story about that you were a scholarship player coming to state? And he looked at me and goes, no, do you think they'd like that? I'm like, yeah, kind of here in the triangle they do because all the Carolina Duke people, as soon as he told them that, they're like, oh, I can't believe we've never heard this before. And then the Duke people said something. Carolina people said something. There was one state guy in there, and they got into a nice conversation, which, in the state of North Carolina, college basketball will do that. But that was a good story with Drago. But, like I said, you just never know what's going to happen. I also enjoy stories. Oh, today's show. Thank you, Drago. Thank you, Amnon. Today's show brought to you by Oak City Tech. Speaking of Drago, you got to have a website, folks. If people don't know how and where to find you, how are they supposed to get in touch with you to talk about buying your service or your product? So the first thing you need is a good website. You don't need all the bells and whistles. You just need it functional where people can find the information they need so they can make the decision to hire you. You can go to oakcitytech.com. Let them know what you're looking for. I know they'll be able to help you because he's done our website for Wired to Change. Thank you, Amnon. Another thing I like to ask people about is what's their connection to their industry and their job? Why did they get into it? And a couple of good stories come to mind here. Dr. Ashley McGuire, who actually is my chiropractor, and Ashley I think she was on early in the show, early in the run here. And she's a chiropractor, and she saves my back and my wife's back because A, we're getting older, our backs hurt, but B, we have our 2.5-year-old grandson, Oliver. I don't think I've ever shown everybody the picture, but I mean, what's not to love about that? And I'd like to run around with him and roll on the floor with him. And the best thing to do is make sure my back's okay, which, most days it is, but some days it hurts. And Dr. Ashley got into the field because when she was pregnant, she had never gone to a chiropractor before, but when she was pregnant, she was having back issues. And she went to visit a chiropractor, and she said, whatever the chiropractor did worked. And her pain went away, discomfort went away. The rest of the pregnancy was good, in her words. And the delivery was good. Everything's fine. Lily, their daughter, I think is 9 now. And Ashley said that's what made her get into the chiropractic field. Again, love those stories. The other one we just had on a couple weeks ago, Miller Lawson with Lawson Insurance Group. Don't know if you remember, but his dad, Ken Sr., had a hardware store at the corner of Millbrook and Six Forks. It had the hardware store there for years, and Terry Sr., we know everybody knew him as Big T, knew Ken Sr., Miller's dad, said, you know what, you need to be an insurance agent. So as Miller tells the story, his dad put a table at the front of the hardware store, started selling insurance, got out of the hardware business, started selling insurance. And then here comes Ken Jr., here comes Miller, and here comes Mike, the three sons of Ken Sr. So now it's a second generation family business. All three brothers are working in it. And I just think those are cool stories. You get weird looks sometimes when you tell people you have a family business, you work with family members. But if everything is explained properly, and here's what you're in charge of, here's your area of expertise, you do this, I'll do this, and if there's a third person, they'll do this. If that's all explained and nobody is horning in on the other one, it's generally going to go pretty well, especially when the family members working together. If nobody cares who gets the credit and you just want to keep going to the bank and making money, that's usually what works out good. My brother and I did that. We had two businesses and we're wired completely different. He loves payroll and insurance and Excel spreadsheets and everything on a computer. And I just want to talk all day. So it worked out real good. Our mom laughed a good bit about that. But those are some of the good stories I had. And Jeff Austin, who was a lawyer on a while ago as well, he collects sand from different beaches around the world. And he started asking friends when he found out they're going to a beach, hey, can you bring me back just a small Ziploc bag of sand? That's all he's looking for. And then as he got to know people and word got out, people would just bring him sand. I think he's got it from a fair number of locations around the world. It's a pretty good story. But again, those are things you find out that you want to talk about. Hey, how'd that get started? What have you learned from that? So it was a lot of fun. But Drago, those are some of my better moments on the show, the things that got me laughing and the things I found out that I didn't know I was going to find out, like Joe Navarre's paper route story. And Charles and I were born in a Salvation Army hospital for unwed mothers. But anyways, folks, I have got guests booked for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we can make sure everything stays on schedule, nothing goofy happens. But I hope you've enjoyed the show today. There have been some wonderful stories, and all the guests have been a lot of fun to have on, and they've played around with us, just laughing about telling stories. So,
and you may find out that those shows, what you do by yourself, are very popular.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if it is. I enjoy doing this. It's hard talking for about 45 minutes by yourself, but if you enjoy talking, yeah, again, it all comes down to the content.
Absolutely.
It all comes down to the content, because I was starting to work on this, like, all right, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to not do the show. I miss it. And again, with anything, it's just you want consistency. If everybody knows every Monday at 11, 48 or so weeks out of the year, we're going to be here to do the show. I thought, you know what? We got some pretty good stories to tell. So now
you do.
Now I got to start working on the second batch should this happen again, so I can be ready to go.
Yep.
So, but we have fun. So anyways, folks, hope you enjoyed this. And we will see you next time on Triangle BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.